Hi, this is Jay Shepard from Arkansas State University, where I teach electric guitar and classical guitar. Today we're going to talk about a subject that a lot of students don't like to talk about, as well as their teachers, and that's note reading on electric guitar in jazz big band. There's a few reasons for this, so let's break down the psychology and look at a few reasons why guitar and sight reading and big band don't usually gel well together. The first reason is most guitar players don't come from a formal music education background, from what I've found. A lot of them show up learning how to play guitar by ear, by learning things off the record, learning things that their friend or a family member taught them, just kind of learning by the tradition of the instrument. This isn't all bad. This can turn around and make some things good, like improvisation and using your ear to hear things that are unfamiliar, but familiar to your ear, but not as familiar to your sight. The second reason is if a guitar player has been reading music, maybe they're not used to reading in the key of B flat and E flat and A flat and D flat and seeing all those flats. They usually like to read in sharp keys. Same thing with orchestra players. But band instruments are usually taught up to start with one or two flats in the key signature just given. So that's a big psychological thing you need to understand as a guitar player, is you need to put yourself in a position to where you're reading and knowing scale patterns that can get you playing in three flats and two flats in the key signature all the time. A third reason is most of the time I've noticed the directors don't have a lot of experience on the instrument pedagogically, even to show you where to play a note or the best places to play a note. So hopefully in today's lesson we're going to address all three things and get you on a path to where you can succeed. First of all, if you're a guitar player that doesn't have any skill in traditional music notation, you need to get some. You need to get a lot of proficiency in reading and writing music. This is essential to work with other musicians and share ideas and play each other's music and play music written by other people and play music together and do it quickly. It's one thing to sit around in your garage and jam around until everybody knows a tune, and it's another to work in a system where eventually you can pass out a few sheets of paper and play for 15 or 20 minutes, which is a lot cooler in my opinion. So the first thing is you need to change your mind about musical notation and learning how that works, if that is a hurdle for you. Okay, the second thing is, now that we're convinced that we need to read musical notation, we need to learn all the skills and some of the things we may already know in those keys that band people are used to learning in, like B flat and E flat. I think B flat is a good neutral key to start to learn in, because they like to read in two flats a lot, and if they read in three flats, well, you just add a flat and it's a new note that you learn. If you want to read in one flat, well, it's one new note that you have to change from two flats. So let's look at a scale pattern here in the key of B flat major. Notice I start the pattern with my pinky finger. This is kind of contrary to a lot of people's logic. Most people, when they think of the first note on a guitar that they're going to play, they usually use their first or second finger. But what you want to start with today is start with this fourth finger for the first scale degree, and then you go to the next string for the C and follow the pattern to get the other notes. Notice there's a little shift that happens when you get to the seventh scale degree, the A. You have to go down to the second fret and then come back up with the same finger to get the B flat. But the rest of it is all in the same position except for that one little shift. So you have to work that out. What you want to do is you want to play with this until you don't have to look at what you're doing. You want to play with it until you can really feel this scale pattern and even say each individual note. Next, you want to write down all the individual notes on a piece of staff paper yourself. So you want to write a treble clef and two flats in the key signature, B and E flat, and look at the notes as you play them. And you can just kind of play around, go back and forth in the scale, but always keep your eyes on the paper on what note you're playing. And then continue to say the note name. This kind of almost meditative kind of practice is going to help you identify the note name quicker than anything, because you're not worried about rhythm necessarily yet, but you have to identify the note that you're on and be able to skip around and play up and down on the scale and know your notes. So that's the first step. The next step I'd recommend is learning a scale that's almost like the major scale, but adds another flat to the key signature. This is important because eventually you'd probably have 3 flats in the key signature instead of just 2 flats. This next scale, instead of a B-flat major scale, is called the B-flat Mixolydian scale. The Mixolydian scale looks a lot like the major scale, but you're going to notice that the 7th note of the scale is an A-flat instead of an A natural. That's going to change the fingering a little bit, but it's very alike and the position is identical to the one that you played the first one in. It goes like this. Do the same thing with this scale. Write out a key signature with 3 flats and go up and down and say the note names to each note, and even maybe try to close your eyes and imagine those pitches on the staff as you play them. This will help you gain familiarity very quickly with the notes in just a couple weeks of practice. While we're at it, let's go ahead and add another flat to the key signature and keep the same pattern. This will yield what you call a B-flat Dorian scale. The Dorian scale sounds a lot like a minor scale, but you notice the 6th note is up a fret or a half step. So it's like a minor scale with a raised 6th. Another way to think about this scale is like a Mixolydian scale, but with a minor third, or the lower third as opposed to the major third. You'll see when you get to the 3rd note. The B-flat Dorian scale goes like this. So there's B-flat Dorian. Do the same thing. Write it out. Think about the note names. Think about the difference between the ones you played and the new note, the D-flat. Now we're going to do something a little interesting to get you reading a little more chromatically. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the key of B-flat. So think about 2 flats in the key signature. And what you want to do is you want to put the B-flat major scale and the B-flat Mixolydian scale on top of each other. So basically you end up with 8 different notes instead of 7. You'll have the A-flat and the A natural. In jazz we call this scale the Bebop scale. It goes like this. Do the same thing, play around with that scale and see if you can get some facility with those notes and clearly see the notes where they fall on the staff. The next example has a real interesting sound. What we're doing here is we're putting a Mixolydian scale and the Dorian scale on top of each other. So now we have what looks like a Mixolydian scale with an extra third or an extra note below the original third. It looks like this. Jazz is all about chromaticism and all about leading tones, and you'll see a lot of chromatic notes in jazz that you read on paper. That's why it's critical to get comfortable seeing these leading tones in these places. So spend a lot of time with the bebop scale and this new scale. I don't know what you call it. I'll just call it a hybrid scale that you put together two different scales. So that would be the Mixolydian and the Dorian on top of each other. Practice that one. The next scale I'd like to look at is relative to the B-flat major scale. It's called the B-flat major pentatonic. The pentatonic major scale is different from the major scale in the fact that it only features 5 of its notes. The 5 notes that you're going to take from the major scale to make the pentatonic scale are the first note, second note, third note, fifth note, and the sixth note. This is going to give you B flat, C, D, F, and G. Here's the fingering for that scale. The relative scale to the B-flat pentatonic major scale, or major pentatonic, is the G minor pentatonic. It's got the same notes, but it starts lower on the G. It looks like this. Another scale we can get from the G minor pentatonic is we can fill in the gaps and make a G minor scale. It looks like this. And notice the G minor scale we're about to play has the same notes the B flat major scale did. That's because they are relative scales or relative modes. That means they have the same notes on them. They just start and end emphasizing a different pitch of that set of notes. It goes like this. If we go back to the G minor pentatonic, we can add a note to each octave and make a blues scale like this. The thing about this G minor blues scale, or G blues scale, we can just call it G blues, is that not only can it be used over things in G, but you can also use it in B flat chords, like B flat 7, because it's the relative to B flat major. So if you have like a B flat 7 chord, you can use this G minor or G blues scale to play over it. So all I did to do that was just emphasize the B flats in that scale as opposed to the G's. And that little blues note gave me a flexible third. It kind of jazzed things up a little bit. So that's a neat trick to play in a familiar scale and make it sound a little less bluesy, but still use the blues scale pattern. Next, let's look at the B flat blues scale. And all it is just the B flat, well, it's the G blues scale, but moved up 3 frets to the key of B flat. It looks like this. So you can play it with the same fingering as you did the G scale, but I would like you to learn it in this fingering. That'll do. It'll help you find and overlay some of the notes that you already used in the other scale patterns. That's all. Finally, let's look at a kind of a neat scale that overlays the notes of a B-flat Dorian scale with a B-flat blues scale. This is a interesting sound. It's actually more popular than you think. It looks something like this. lot of times you see rock guitar players use this pattern like this with this mode or with this hybrid scale. They do things like that, or maybe things like kind of have this little symmetrical pattern there with 1, 2, and 4 on the D, G, and B string, you know. And it's really idiomatic to play and can come up with some pretty good licks with that scale. So to close, be sure that you've written down all these scales on some staff paper. If you don't have any staff paper, you can go online and search Google for free printable staff paper and you'll come up with something. Get some staff paper and treble clef and be sure to write down all the notes and practice until you can play them where they are. Be sure that you are very clear in your mind where these notes are on the staff as you play through them. It's not enough just to get the pattern under your fingers, but get the pattern under your fingers, hear the notes in your head before you play them, and also be able to see them on a staff. That's really important, because if you can't see where they are on the staff, you'll never be able to play them on written music on the staff. Also, in another final closing note, if you have trouble reading rhythm, my best advice to you, if you're not in band at school other than just jazz band or orchestra, join band or orchestra. This will get you playing rhythms a lot. If you going into band, maybe try to be a percussionist. Even if you have to go back to beginning band and learn from the beginning, it's worth it. You need to learn how to read rhythm, and it's kind of like training for a marathon. You can't learn it overnight or in a couple months. You really have to work every day steadily learning rhythm and mastering rhythm to be able to take care of that. But if you don't have trouble with rhythm, good. This note reading will help you go a long way.